And next up we have Joe Ladner.
It's my pleasure to introduce Norm and Jackie Schmitz. They moved in last Thursday on their 55th wedding anniversary. They grew up in the south side of Chicago and met while they were working at Carson Perry Scott in Chicago. They've lived in Denver. Dayton brought Norm to Minneapolis. They lived several places around here. Then they have their own women's clothing store in Southdale. Welcome.
Next up is Don Ricks.
Well, thank you. Marianne and I have the privilege of introducing a couple as relatively new residents. They've been here a couple of months, moving here from way south, like Minnetonka or something like that. Anyway, they have thought about Trillium Woods for a couple of years before coming here, which is probably a common story for a lot of us. But they decided at the beginning of the 2 years that this is where they wanted to be. They married later in life. After Rolf's wife passed away, he went to a high school reunion. I don't know if he was looking or not, but anyway, he met Adele again, and they had known each other in high school, so it's not an uncommon thing. The real blessing in their lives is that they're a blended family of 8 children. Now that's a house full, and then there are grandchildren and more to come. So they have the privilege of having many in their family, and they deserve it. They're hard-working, hard-thinking Norwegians. They deserve a large family. They have a place in Annandale on a lake. They've sold their house in Minnetonka. They're delighted to be here. And if it were not for a place like Trillium Woods, most of us wouldn't have the privilege to meet them. Take the time, meet Adele and Rolf. Thank you.
And Sally Kelly.
I'd like to introduce Joan and Larry Seymour. They've come to us from Edina. And Joan was a homemaker, and she took care of 8 children. I think that's more than a full-time job. And Larry, we have another doctor in the house, and I see we have another doctor right over there that was introduced. So I made a list of all the physicians that are living now at Trillium Woods. And before we came here today, that I didn't know, Larry was 11th on the list, but now, my gosh, you possibly are 12th on the list. It's just amazing. And Larry brings a different specialty. He was a neurosurgeon. And they had a little hiccup trying to get a house sold in Edina, so they've been trying to get here for quite a while, but they finally made it. We're very happy to have you, so please give them a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Rita. The other item I'd like to talk about is today is the final day for you to turn in your name if you want to be considered for the resident council. Everyone received a piece of paper indicating to the election committee the people who would like to be on the resident council. Also, not everybody needs to be on the resident council. Probably the most important aspect is people who are on the committees. In that group of papers, you could volunteer to be on a committee, please turn those in. There's an election box down at the front desk. So it's very important that we get people on these committees. That's where much of the work is done around here. And so Bill Strawman is the chair this year, and he said the box is going to probably be picked up after today, and they'll start the count and be presenting to you those who want to be on the council or who want to be on the various committees. This is very important for the residents here. The resident council is here to represent the residents. And it's not a place for people to go and make a lot of complaints. The most important part is pointing out areas that can be improved. As we know, who've been living here for a number of years, or even just a few months, that this is a very nice place to be at. And we've been here for about 4 years, and we've enjoyed every minute of it. But the most important part is we have the ability to have a voice in what happens. And if you have any recommendations for improvements, contact people who are on the council or myself and let us know. And we can work with the administration to try to make things better for all of us. So again, make sure you turn in your papers, your volunteer papers, and the count is going to start as of this weekend. So thank you. So that's all I have, and I don't know if there's any questions about the election or the volunteering. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
All right, are there any final questions for me that I can try to answer or take back to EA? Oh, got one in the middle. Mr. Lee. Our other microphone is broken, so I'll let you.
I had a question here. Having this regulatory officer from LCS come on up, the Minnesota legislature recently passed the elder care protection law. And of course, all the components of it are completely unknown, as some bureaucratic committee in the health department, I guess, even as we speak, are working out torturous details on what that all means. Apparently, though, for the first time, it defines what assisted living as a legal entity means in Minnesota, what you have, what requirements you have to meet to get a license to hang out a shingle. Recall that, and apparently it also includes Alzheimer's care in all its forms. And that's probably going to take several years to implement. But I noticed the timing of that is almost coincidental with when phase 2, if it seems financially feasible, Trump doesn't drag us into Armageddon with China or whoever else is arguing with. During the planning phases of the health center part, where new regulations might be in place. And I'm wondering if LC has hired a lobbyist or is working with ARP or any of the other senior care advocacy groups. I forgot the name of that one.
Leading age.
Leading age. To kind of get your voice heard to the Minnesota legislative process, so regulatory overreach doesn't occur. Apparently this law was passed in knee-jerk reaction to egregious abuses that have occurred, mostly outstate. But they may demand 2-week random urine tests for everybody who works here. Which would be, don't know how you feel about that. But is there some sort of movement down in LCS this Is that why this regulatory officer at LCS has her job, or what's going on there?
All right, I'll summarize that. So Mr. Lee has been paying attention to what's been happening in the legislature, and they've recently passed some new elder care regulations that are going to be put into effect here in the next couple of years, and some of them starting pretty immediately. The reason for those new regulations being put into effect really stem from the claims of abuse that we've heard about in the news in really the last 2 years in Minnesota, specifically related to assisted living. Every state operates their licensure differently. In the state of Minnesota, we have not had an assisted living license, licensing process or license in general to operate an assisted living. They've identified that that's one of the reasons that elder abuse claims seemed to be skyrocketing in some senior living communities that called themselves assisted livings. We knew this was coming. It's been a long conversation, both in Leading Age and in other advocacy groups. So the question, is LCS doing anything to lobby for us to prevent there from being too much legal or political oversight, especially as this is happening at the exact same time that we're looking at implementing phase 2. LCS is very involved with both Leading Age and Argenta, two advocacy groups for senior living. They utilize that both at the corporate office as well as by using the administrator and executive director at each site to be involved on a state level. So the short answer is yes. We're involved, both Elizabeth Ann and myself, with Leading Age to advocate for us as the legislature is making these rules and defining what it means to have an assisted living license and what all is going to go with that related to the elder care laws. Leading Age has been actively in the fight. Much of the language in the current law is based off of what we as communities have lobbied for. So we have gotten a lot of the things that we wanted in those regulations. We're very focused on what that looks like and what that's going to do to the future. At this point, not knowing exact timing of when that's going to be implemented or the fine details, we're kind of waiting to get that information. But I just got an email from Leading Age actually this morning on some of the detail that they're already aware of. So LCS is involved in that. Our specific compliance analyst, who's coming in August, Megan, she's not directly related to that. They have kind of a separate group who's working on the political stuff that's happening around the country and monitoring that. But she will be there to help us with writing any policies and making sure our policies comply with the rule when the rule is official. Does that answer the question, Mr. Lee?
Sure.
All right. Hitting me with a hard one. Any final easier questions? I always appreciate that, Mr. Lee. Thank you. Yep.
Since the topic has come up, from the standpoint of LCS, would you give the definition of independent living, assisted living, continuous care, and then the other levels? I don't understand all of the nuance as it goes from independent.
Yes. So the question is, can I give a definition for what each level of care is? I will give a brief definition, but I will give a shout out. Next Friday is the Birches Roundtable. I'm happy to provide some more in-depth detail there because I know we're a little bit over time. But independent living is going to be someone who's independent in their home without services or with minimal services. So we're looking at less than 3 hours a day. Someone could potentially choose to have more than that, but independent living, you're independent and safely independent in your home without services or with minimal services. Someone's moving to assisted living if they need what we call 24-hour supervision or more care than 5 to 6 hours. So when therapy does assessments, they may say someone needs 24-hour supervision. They might not need someone in their apartment, but someone keeping an eye on them from a safety perspective, medication reminders consistently, and they may not have a caregiver in independent living who can provide that. Skilled nursing, which is what the Birches is considered, or a nursing home, is going to be 24-hour care. You need more care than is feasible for most people to pay for in their apartment. You've got licensed team members on staff 24/7 to provide those care and services for you, continuous medication management and ongoing nursing care. Very basic overview, but those would be the 3 different levels of care.
When you said 24-hour care, that means 24-hour available care? You don't need to stay.
So the question was, does 24-hour care mean available care or you need the care? Available care. Most people are not going to move to a setting like the Birches until they need close to that, because most people are choosing to stay independent in their homes or in a higher or a lower level of care. So up to 24 hours of care is available for whatever services you may need. So currently we have some residents in the Birches who are more independent, can do things on their own, need us to be around to help when they need it, and we have some residents who require total care and need that 24-hour. All right, anything else? Seeing no other hands in the air, a reminder, Birches Roundtable's next Friday, so if you have more of these questions, I'm happy to answer them. And with that, have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for coming out.